Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. One of the big rumours over the last few months has been effectively confirmed, it seems today, with Adrian Newey set to join Aston Martin on a £150 million deal. 30 million a year over a 5-year span for what Lawrence Stroll intends to make an absolute engineering super team over there at Aston Martin to achieve World Championship success one way or another over these next couple of years. Is this Lance Stroll's ticket to World Championship glory? Can Newey replicate the success that he's had for the last several decades in Formula 1 at this Aston Martin team going forward? And also, what does it mean for Ferrari, the other team that Newey was linked to, but for various reasons that has not transpired? Very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. That, of course, was weatherman Charles Leclerc. Look, there's no race this weekend, so there's always some interesting things going down, but Charles Leclerc also has talked about wanting to race in the 24-hour of Le Mans at some point. Would be crazy if he did it with, like, Max and Fernando. That might not be out of the realms of possibility. There was also some interesting statements from Flavio Briatore, who's recently returned to the Renault team, now known as Alpine, says that Luca Di Maio, the top guy over there, never wants to sell Alpine F1, but of course, he doesn't say they will never sell it. He just says the top guy doesn't want to sell it. Doesn't necessarily mean they won't. Nico Rosberg last weekend at Monza on the broadcast said that he had an email in his inbox that basically said, hey, do you want to buy a part of Alpine? We are willing to come to that kind of arrangement. And it definitely seems like, as unfortunate as it may be for the sports and also for Renault, that they're gearing up for that. Because if they are going to shut down their engine project and use Mercedes engines, then, you know, what really is the point having the team at all anymore at that moment? Speaking of Mercedes, this was pretty fascinating. Yes, Kimi Raikkonen, by the way, people were commenting saying he shows more emotion here than he did in his entire Formula 1 career, but this is Robin Raikkonen, of course, his son, who I think is 9 or 10 at this point in the Mercedes W15 last weekend. So there's just an interesting possibility here that I thought I'd mention, right? That Andrea Kimi Antonelli, who was possibly named after Kimi Raikkonen, I think it's definitely pretty likely if you line up the timeline and who was involved in making those decisions. So Kimi, as in Antonelli, might well be in the Mercedes car for many a year to come. And who knows, right? You know, is it possible that in, 10, 12 years, when potentially Kimi Raikkonen's son, Robin Raikkonen, was maybe good enough to be in the team, who knows, he's currently doing well in karting, then they could have a driver lineup Mercedes of Kimi and Raikkonen, if you see what I'm saying. But Kimi, as in Raikkonen, actually commented on Antonelli, saying that back in my day there was no simulator. They know, Mercedes, how to get him ready to come into the sport. Back in my day, just jumped in and got going. The question really is, I would say, for Mercedes on what happens between these two for next year. It's no secret that as it stands, Max Verstappen is not happy with the way that things are currently trending at Red Bull, and if that doesn't change, he will look for alternatives. Ferrari is not going to be an alternative with Leclerc and Hamilton. It doesn't seem like McLaren is really going to be an alternative, although if Max was available, they might find a space, but no, McLaren, they probably wouldn't. Mercedes would be the team, or maybe Aston Martin. That's the other interesting one, especially as we'll come on to over the coming minutes, given that they're having the Honda Works partnership. Newey is joining, to our understanding. That could be attractive to Max as well, but Mercedes would be the chief contender, given what they've done in Formula 1 over the last couple of decades, really. And Rosberg therefore mentions, well, there's only 2 seats available. There are 3 drivers. Clearly, Toto sees Antonelli as the future of Mercedes, and that's why even Lewis Hamilton was only offered 1+1 year deals, because they wanted to make sure they didn't lose Antonelli. Now they're putting him in the car. So Russell is the man probably under the most threat, if anything, right? Because, as long as Antonelli does a respectable job next to Russell next year and shows glimpses and, doesn't get completely battered, then if Verstappen is available, they probably replace Russell instead, right? I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting one, but I don't think that Nico is wrong that George is probably the one here with everything to lose, because, let's say Max tells Toto, okay, yeah, you know what, 2026, let's do it. Does Toto get rid of Antonelli or get rid of Russell? I mean, that depends on the results of next season, but clearly there's more leeway for Antonelli at that point than there is for Russell, and Russell next year as the leader of the team needs to be able to prove that he is a driver capable of winning the World Championship, and if he can't, then, let's be real, he probably gets fired for Max if that possibility arises. So, George has definitely some pressure on next season, I would say, with the way things are currently going. Ferrari, kind of interesting things on them. They can't be convinced their new floor has solved the bouncing problems. They're pretty confident, though, that it has, but at Monza, you're not really going to see that, right? They also became the first team to ever win 20 times at a single circuit, and, well, 20 Ferrari wins at Monza shouldn't really be a massive surprise that that is what we have seen here, and Charles Leclerc has now done it on 2 occasions. Not many other Ferrari drivers have done that ever. As we said, with Red Bull, they're in a tricky spot right now, and they don't have Adrian Newey to fall on to get them out of their problems. I think even, was it Paul Monaghan maybe mentioned it from Red Bull a couple of weeks ago now, that whenever they've had problems or misunderstandings or whatever over the last couple of years, Newey will come in and just provide the solution. They no longer have the access to that if you're Red Bull. There is some positivity though. Gianpiero Lambiase was approached, apparently not just by Ferrari. We saw the rumours yesterday, if you guys didn't watch yesterday's video, that GP was approached by Ferrari to say, hey, do you want to be Hamilton's race engineer in 2025 and beyond? And he said, well, you know, I've got a pretty good relationship with Max. Hey, Mr. Horner, I've got this offer from Ferrari. Can you give me some more money, basically, and I'll stay? And apparently McLaren also interested in getting GP away. Makes sense, to be fair, because, you know, Zach Brown was giving it all this, you know, just talking large, wasn't he? When basically Horner, the drama was happening, Newey was leaving, Wheatley was leaving, and Zach Brown made the comment of there's plenty of CVs flying around for these Red Bull guys, and maybe it makes sense that McLaren were therefore in contact with GP to try and steal him away as well, because why not? Given what's happened at Red Bull this year, if you are going to try and get any of those guys, now is the time to make your move. But GP and seemingly Red Bull have said, all right, we'll pay a bit more money or whatever, and he's going to stay at the team. So I guess that's a positivity on some level. But Adrian Newey is most certainly not returning to that team. Instead, it looks like Aston Martin is going to be the next step. And it's a remarkable set of circumstances how much money Aston have thrown into their team with Lawrence Stroll over the last several years. Their brand new state-of-the-art facility, their brand new wind tunnel, the amount of money they've spent on hiring engineers and top people from various teams over the last several years, and that is continuing at pace. They're set to sell a stake of the team recently as well. That will apparently increase the value of the team, you know, near enough £1.5–2 billion, which is pretty insane, and maybe this is part of the way that they are going to be able to actually pay for Adrian Newey's salary, as we'll see in a second. Of course, we'll discuss the Ferrari angle on this in a second. Hamilton, after leaving Monza, made a pretty emotional, kind of sentimental, as Denny describes it here, message on Instagram, kind of saying like, that was the last European race of the season, the last time that I'll be in this engineering room, because, you know, they take the motorhome and all this stuff around the European races, but they're not going to take it to like Baku or Singapore, right? So, you know, basically Hamilton just feels, you know, pretty emotional about the fact that he's been in this team for so many a year. And obviously that is finally coming to an end this season, but he will not be working, as he may have expected to, with Adrian Newey next year, because it's been rumoured now for some time what the next step was going to be here. Now we're getting this from BBC Sport, which means it's as good as done. They were the first to report that Newey was leaving Red Bull in the first place. That, of course, turned out to be true. So, yeah, the rumour has it, it's a big contract they're offering Newey here. I wanted to go through most of the article here that Andrew Benton put together, because there were a few quite interesting details. I know that it's off-centre and kind of small, but I'll just read through most of this. Eddie Jordan refused to comment on it. Aston Martin say that he's been linked to many teams and would be an asset to any team. So, you know, I wonder why. But clearly it's a bit of a coup, as is described, because we thought that Ferrari were getting him or some other team were getting him, and that's not happened in the end. Stroll has funded this state-of-the-art new factory, the wind tunnel, employed a lot of top engineers, has the Honda Works deal to partner with from 2026 and beyond. Of course, Alonso is still going to be there as well for the near term. And if they can prove to be good, especially in 2026, maybe Max ends up there over the couple of seasons after that. Of course, you know, we don't need to talk about Adrian Newey and what he's achieved, although we will do in a couple of seconds anyway. And of course, notably, despite all the discussion about, oh, will Newey retire? He's just going to sell on his boat. You're like, I was telling you guys at the time, there was no way Newey was going to retire. It's just in this guy's nature and in the nature of many others in that position that you don't want to just sit back and let the brain rest and do nothing and sail around the world. Maybe you do that that for a couple of months, but you're going to want to get back into the sport or do something engaging at some point, especially when you're as competitive as Adrian Newey appears to be. So, and also they negotiated with Red Bull an early exit clause from his deal, so pretty clear that he wasn't exactly just going to step away and not do anything. Now, 2026, of course, you can only work on those cars from the start of 2025, but it's also clear that other individuals have joined Aston as well. Andy Cowell, who was largely considered to be the mastermind behind Mercedes' engine project in 2014 for the turbo hybrid era, he's joining as CEO on the 1st of October, so that's a pretty big get. They've also got Enrico Cardile coming over from Ferrari very soon as well, and Dan Fallows joined a couple of years ago as well after working with Newey at Red Bull for several years, and Newey has basically the keys to do, it seems, whatever he wants to do. That may have been the problem with the Ferrari situation, right? The rumour has it that there were a couple of things that went wrong with the Newey negotiations with Ferrari. It seems like that was going to happen, and probably for Newey that was, you know, the most attractive prospect in the sense of winning, obviously working for the Scuderia and winning in the immediate term, whereas in an overall package, it seems like Aston Martin put together a more compelling package, not exactly just monetarily, but of course we'll discuss that right about now, but also just in terms of what they could offer Newey from a control perspective, right? Newey doesn't necessarily want to join, I don't imagine, the world of politics that is inherent in Ferrari on some level. Rumour had it that Newey effectively told Vasseur, hey, I want a veto over technical decisions made, you know, I want a lot of power in the team, and Fred Vasseur and Ferrari were unwilling to give up that level of power because you know, they felt like it was a risk, and probably understandably so, whereas Aston Martin, it seems, are pretty much willing to do whatever it takes to get the greatest designer ever on board, and that includes the monetary position as well. There are also rumours that Ferrari didn't really want to get into a bidding war. Now, you know, the money isn't everything at the end of the day, and I think if the terms had potentially have been better for Ferrari, he might have gone there instead, but of course there's the other complication of it being in Italy. Maybe you got to learn a bit of Italian, move there, have a house there, whatever. You know, there's complicating factors. Aston Martin does make more sense in many ways for Newey, and apparently with bonuses, with add-ons or whatever, it's possible that this deal is worth up to 30 million a year on what could well be a 5-year contract to take him from 25 all the way pretty much up until 2030, with the intention, I suppose, that Aston Martin have got to win the championship on one at least of those seasons. Rumour has it that on Tuesday, in a couple of days' time, that's when they are going to confirm that he's going to be joining the team. And, you know, Andrew Benson, the BBC, are rarely ever wrong on stuff like this. So, yeah, the feeling is that he's going to lead up an engineering super team with many of the other names that we mentioned over the last couple of minutes. But, of course, you know, the main force of the super team, of course, is going to be Newey himself, and it seems like he's agreed now to this incredible 5-year deal. Of course, the tenure of Newey does speak for himself. His time at Williams, his time at McLaren, of course his time at Red Bull has yielded championships everywhere he has been. And Aston Martin know this, and therefore they absolutely want to get Newey onto their books, especially when it comes down to the fact that you've got a brand new set of regulations in 2026, and typically when a new regulation set comes out, Newey is rather good at deciphering the way to tackle it, as of course famously happens in 2022 with the RB18 over the last couple of years. So what do you guys think about this stuff in the comment section below, right? I mean, there's no doubt that yes, Aston, they started last year very strongly, right? The amount of podiums that Alonso scored, they should have won Monaco, really. There were a couple of things they could have done differently at Monaco to have won that Grand Prix in 2023. None of that happened. They've clearly lost their way over the last season or so, and that doesn't look to be changing anytime soon. But the new factory is coming online, the wind tunnel's getting ready to go, and they have, Aston Martin, there's no doubt about it, have all of the resources to be a championship contending team over the next couple of seasons. They're doing everything right in many respects. The only thing they might be doing wrong is the Lance Stroll situation, right? Because Lawrence owns the team, is putting all the money in. Lance Stroll is still there driving the car. Alonso is still phenomenal. Is he necessarily the driver that he used to be? Obviously, you're going to debate that, and over the coming years, who knows? But that's the only concern that I would have for Aston, really, and also in terms of like the mentality, because, you know, are the engineers, is Newey, are the other guys thinking, you know, how serious of an operation really are we when Stroll is probably not the best driver to have in that car, but he is going to be there, right? But Alonso will therefore, you know, be in position potentially to take advantage of it. Newey, of course, himself said that he wants to work with Hamilton or Alonso before the end of his career. Looks like he's at least going to get to tick one of those off, but in exchange for that, he's going to be there probably for a rather long time at the team. Of course, for the other teams, such as Ferrari, they don't have Newey as a result of this, right? They do have other talents coming onto Ferrari. Loic Serra, of course, is going to lead up their chassis side, formerly of Mercedes, but still, if you are Ferrari, you're looking at this situation thinking, well, you know, we didn't want to destroy the internal structure of our operation just to accommodate Newey, and that's probably fair enough. But nonetheless, it is a loss, and it is potentially a loss that might result in Aston Martin at least getting into the mix with these guys over the next couple of seasons or so. It is incredible, though, to think about 2024, because this is only the third ever season where we have 4 teams taking at least 3 wins. It happened, I think, in 74 and 77, but in the last 50 years, that's never happened. So we obviously have Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes all taken at least 3 wins this season. And in terms of pole positions, this is the first time ever that number 1 has happened, and also those 4 teams have taken at least 2 poles each. So it is a pretty historic season in many ways, and it may have an absolute blockbuster ending. Next year, maybe even better. 2026, you'd expect to reset the playing field to some degree, as we saw back in 2014 on the engine side, where Mercedes had an absolute dominant force. But if it does reset, which team is most likely to take advantage of that situation? Is Aston Martin well prepared? They have the factory, they have all the resources, they presumably have Adrian Newey as well. They've got the Honda engine partnership that Newey has experience working with from Red Bull over the last several years. There's just lots of reasons why Aston, I think, should be, they genuinely should be, a championship contender within 3 to 4 years. And although it's not at Ferrari, it would be an incredible way for Newey to cap off his career if he was to win another championship or 2 with the Aston Martin team, given where things currently stand. But very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Just before we close out with, of course, this is Baku, and over the last several years, we have had many different winners. 2022 was Max, 2023 was Checo. Checo also won in 21 after all the drama at the end of that race, but Daniel Ricciardo, of course, Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas have won here over the last few years. So this year, given that it's one of the more chaotic seasons that we've had, anything could be up for grabs this weekend. We know that Baku, it might not be the best track in my opinion, but it does tend to deliver some chaos and generally some drama. So, you know, it's going to be a fascinating race coming up next weekend. But very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.